Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legion. A great episode. So much went down in this episode that we're going to have to digest it all. First of all, just obviously most of the, it's so interesting what that ended up being, that giant hole, and then the rabbit being used as bait to kind of, the moment, she was pulling it out the rabbit, I was like, drop the hook. Drop the hook, Sid, and it's it clips into her hand and just drags her, and I was like, no! I was literally screaming at the TV to drop the hook. I normally don't do that, but it was just one of those moments, drop the hook! Nevertheless, she finds Melanie down there, which Melanie's just talking about how, men are just kind of the worst thing that's ever happened for women. Kind of their greatest bane, essentially. And Sydney's just not wanting to listen to her, because for her, it's oh, I'm tired of actually listening to you. It's the fact of the matter is, you're pissed Oliver's left, that's what this is all about. And she's just kind of that's not my situation. Try to leave, it's just kind of a looping place, so. But then Melanie starts showing her all these little things. It's kind of making her see David for who he really is. It's oh, you say that David, David, oh, what's the gift in this curse? It's well, obviously, the curse was the Farouk in his head. It's no, that was the gift. The curse is, the fact is, himself. Essentially implying that basically Farouk's not the monster we think he is. That the true monster is David. That basically he's been a monster the entire time. Because he might have been in control. Farouk might have been in control a lot of times. Especially using the example of the whole attack on Division 3 last season. It's David might not have been 100% in control, but he enjoyed it nonetheless. So that basically it's a face he's been hiding from Sid. The fact is he's lied about so much. I knew something exactly went down between him and future Sid. There's that, all the stuff that he's kept from her, all the terrible stuff that he's done, which at the same time, it's well, you make the argument where it's not 100% his fault, because, it is on him, but it's almost everything kind of led to him becoming the monster that he did. But that's the ultimate question. When it's all said and done, would David have always ended up this way, or is it just other things led? The fact is, growing up, hearing voices, kind of having all that power. That's the thing. It's and I thought it was kind of interesting the way Melanie phrased it. It was no piece of ass is going to measure up to being chosen by God, having these abilities, having such a great destiny. It's essentially kind of implying the greatness that is David. It's he loves you more like a mom loves it, the love between a child and a mom, or a dog and its bone. And I guess in a sense, it kind of makes sense in retrospect. Obviously we later on find out that it's Farouk, because I was even asking, I was how the hell is she showing him all of this stuff? It's obviously Farouk must have messed with her head, or and now she's messing with Sid. So no, that's exactly Farouk, because makes sense, because you have access to conversations, things you shouldn't have access to. I guess the reason why he was able to get even them sleeping together, it probably one of the things he picked up when he was in future Sid's head, that any point in time he came in contact with David, he probably ripped that out of his head. I guess it's also the fact is he was a roommate of David, so it makes sense why a lot of stuff he can end up pulling up. But some of the other stuff, it might be just stuff he got from Sid, the future Sid's head, when he was inside. But they also have David torturing Oliver for the purposes of trying to find out where Sid is. But the thing I was trying to get to is the fact is, because he himself, Farouk, has compared them to being gods, and that people being ants, just lesser than them. And it's the analogy makes sense. The mother being the one with all the power, and he's this child, this pathetic little thing, you get the coddle. He's supposed to be the parent in that analogy. And it's a dog and a bone. And it's this is the thing that he loves and cares about, but it's just a thing. It doesn't really matter to him, because he's the sentient, more powerful, is what it's trying to get across, which is and the sad thing is Sid is buying into it, but even then you can't fault her and Farouk, because there is truth in everything he's saying. Obviously he's spinning it to manipulate her, but in the end it's still kind of all the lies David's done, all the stuff, even torturing Oliver, you see the smile across his face, and he even went as far as call him Legion, the world killer. I was so that's where that comes into, because if you listen to anything I had last season, I know nothing about Legion. The fact of the matter is, I thought what the whole Legion thing was supposed to represent is the fact is he has so many voices in his head, and I thought maybe that kind of accounts for his abilities and stuff like that. Maybe it's a different personality connects to a different ability. But in particular, that there's so many different voices in his head, I thought that's what the whole Legion thing's supposed to be. maybe that's kind of the argument, but it could just be the fact is that it's because he represents a legion. Being as powerful as he is like a legion and an army of people. So I guess that's probably more so what it's supposed to be. It's kind of be more of a more literal definition rather than the way I was kind of treating it more as a literal yet metaphorical, it's kind of how I was kind of treating it, but nevertheless. Because he's even get to the point where it's like, I can, maybe, he's a good, but even trying to say those words, like Sid was choking them back. Because obviously this is a man that she loves. She legitimately loves him, but this is something she brought up before. It's like, can it be that he's actually doing this for love is what she was thinking. That was her biggest concern, whether or not he was actually doing any of this for love. And it's hard to say whether he is or not. Because even David himself later on is like, honestly, the fact is all he could think about was all the things he was going to do when he catches up to Farouk. He's like, oh, the terrible things I'm going to do to him, and it makes me feel good. He's like, that's what worries him the most. So even David's starting to recognize the monster in him. But once again, is that something, because Farouk helped feed that monster. It turned him into kind of the lunatic that he is in. I mean, David thought that was kind of his armor, but I guess arguably, maybe, I don't know, because it also makes you want to go back to that whole like consciousness moment he had last season when he was talking to the other version of himself, the more rational side of his brain that had the British accent and everything. It makes you wonder, was that just a manifestation of this monster trying to hide itself? I mean, to be fair, like monsters making themselves look human, it's a lot easier to kind of run around. And it kind of even goes back to that Division dude being like, it wears a human face, and it's like there was a double meaning to that. Like one meaning you thought of just being the parasite, but now it's like, oh, it could mean that it was David himself wearing a human face the entire time. Once again, you also have to think about the fact that this is all coming from Farouk, so obviously he's going to spin it a certain way. Because I guess ultimately what he wants to do is that if he can turn Sid, the person David loves, like actually does care about, if he can turn her into a weapon against him, it will make him weaker and give him the opportunity to kill David. I guess that's the whole point. Or maybe on some level, I mean, is that what he even wants? Does he even care about that? Like, it's hard to say what Farouk really wants. He knows that in this story, because of Future Sid, it's like, oh, Farouk, the villain, am now the hero. So the argument then becomes, is that him feeding into that, trying to be the hero, or is it just a situation of, is he trying to drive a wedge between Sid and David? Because is he still trying to get David on his side? Like, oh my God, we could be gods together. Is that what that potentially might be? I don't think so, but I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I'm still not 100% sure what Farouk is doing. It's like, it seems like he's just doing things to be chaotic just for purposes. I mean, it's also interesting considering the fact that this is this reality and stuff like that, especially when we've seen the other realities where David's kind of the monster he's supposed to be. And it's just kind of interesting to see how, I guess that's also one argument you could be making with that, with all those other realities. In some shape or form, that monster always found its way to the surface, even though Farouk never came out to the, because the argument I made back then was like, oh, obviously that's Farouk because he saw the devil with the yellow eyes, but maybe that was more so his projection rather than Farouk, So, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, there's the one reality where he was homeless, where Carrie killed him. There's the one where it seemed like Farouk might be in control. So it's hard to really say with all of this. What's interesting to me was the fact is that Oliver went along with everything. I mean, I guess getting to Melanie was the whole point. Like, why specifically Melanie? What was the purpose? I guess it'd be easier to kind of... Sid would be more willing to listen to it if it came from Melanie because she actually cares about Melanie. She's a friend and an ally. So maybe it'd make it a lot easier coming from her, the manipulation and stuff like that. But I guess maybe that's why Oliver kept his mouth shut, because I was like, why did you say anything before now? I guess it's because Farouk probably would kill Melanie if he did anything. So that's probably why. It makes you wonder, I guess at the end of the previous episode when, Melanie ran to him and they reunited. I guess that was the point where Farouk got inside of her. But now at the end of it all, he got inside of his body. So there's that. Also that Minotaur situation, still not 100% sure what that was, but it seems like it is like a Minotaur, but it seems like it was more so in like a standby state. And then like Farouk activated it, got buff. It like got rid of its like assistance. Like it's kind of like crutches, and the like wheel thing is kind of rolling around and kind of stands on 2 feet, gets more muscular and stuff. So That was really interesting. Even gotta give major props to Carrie for multiple things. For one, when she beat back all those dudes, what their whole deal is, I don't know. Because the first time Lenny pops up by them, they're all wearing the safes on their head. They point her in the right direction. But when the others show up, they're not wearing the safes. There's like so many of them. Like, what? I mean, obviously they're not connected to Farouk directly because the Minotaur kills one of them later on. So it's like maybe they're just guardians of the monastery. So kind of like a last line of defense of too many people going to look for stuff, or maybe they're people controlled by Farouk, maybe they're his followers. I don't know what that's all about. I mean, the Minotaur is probably just killing indiscriminately, so it probably doesn't really care, like, oh, who you are, just like, you're in my way, you're weak, you're going to die. So that's kind of interesting. You do see that later on, Carrie and Sid fight it. The moment it closes in on, like, when she was kind of like, oh, I need something else, I was like, wait, is Sid brother? It's like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. The fact is, it's closing in on her, and you see it kind of reflecting in her eyes. I was like, oh wow, what's about to happen? I thought someone's going to step in and but it's like, it cuts away from there. I'm like, that's where she misses her arm, isn't it? This is where she loses her arm. I was like, okay, because I kept wondering about that, like where future Sid loses that arm, and it's like, we see here. So, but the point I was getting at is like, the fact is that Carrie was able to kick all their asses. Well, it's also interesting too, like, I guess their weapons kind of creates this sound that messed with everyone. You even saw one particular dude, like literally one of the Division 3 people, like literally throwing up. And I was like, oh gosh, it was messing with Carrie, but it seemed like she was able to kind of fight it a little bit more. Pulls out the staff, started kicking ass, seriously. Even with all the numbers still coming out, she still kicked their asses. And when Carrie got dragged down there, she did the whole thing. That was pretty badass. Kind of like, thing I can make a comparison to is like Prince of Persia, where she's kind of leaping, like wall leaping back and forth. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to wall leaping, is Prince of Persia. It's kind of the first video game I ever, in my recollection, that ever came across that had, and it's pretty neat. I was like, wow, she is super skilled. Because I feel like we know she's kind of very good at fighting, but I feel like this season's kind of showcased a lot more of her skills. I feel like, I mean, just kind of showcased a lot more of her, kind of seeing who she is a little bit more, you know? So that was kind of pretty neat. I even like Lenny showing up to him. Also, like that suitcase being like empty, impossible space. I was like, because I was like, yeah, where's she going to get the gun from? I thought like, oh yeah, she trades them the weapon or something. I was like, what is it supposed? It's like, no, the weapon is supposed to be the rifle, or is it supposed to be something else? Is it, I mean, it seems like it's a special rifle, it seems like. I mean, obviously, because it is the weapon in particular, but it's just kind of like her pulling it up like that. Like, I wasn't expecting it. I was like, oh, okay, so that's where the rifle comes from. I was like, so where did she get it? I thought she traded that box for it, because I didn't remember. Maybe she does have it in those particular scenes, and I just didn't remember it, so. But what's also interesting, I completely forgot to talk about, but it kind of fits into the whole episode too, is the fact is at the very beginning, you see like Lenny got blood in her mouth, and then she's surrounded by all these skeletons, and then sitting on a chair is David. What's interesting enough, if you look at his hair, I thought that's kind of pretty neat. To my knowledge, just from the little bit I've seen, I haven't looked at a lot, but I think that's more in line with David from the comic books, his hair being like that. Well, for one, his hair is black, and I think it's bigger in the comic books. It's more like it's like a pompadour, but if you stuck it straight up, it's kind of more like aligned to what he has in the comic books. But I think that's what that's supposed to represent. I mean, I don't know if David's always like that in the comic books, or whether that is just kind of him like losing his mind, becoming a bad guy thing. So, like I said, that was something I wasn't expecting. Like, once all Farouk thing was taken care of, I didn't expect the twist to be like, oh yeah, he's actually the bad guy the entire time, which would present a very interesting thing going forward. Like, I don't think any other show has ever presented a situation like that, where you have the good guy literally shifting over to become the bad. There's some examples I can think of, like, it's just kind of, no, that the example I was thinking of doesn't really apply to this situation, but it's like, it's the main protagonist hero becoming the villain. You know, maybe the argument is maybe he has been the entire time. Because it's actually interesting, because if you remember correctly, David actually kind of brought this situation to a certain degree up last season, because he was talking to Sid, and he was like, you guys are so certain that, you know, all this is happening because I'm a mutant. But it's like, is there a possibility that I am just crazy? And I was like, it's just kind of interesting. Like, it never got brought up this episode, but that's still something that was brought up last season. Like, so it's just kind of interesting to see that kind of come almost full circle in this regard. So that does beg the question, like, my immediate thought about what sets David off is Sid's betrayal. I think her, like, not looking at him the same way eventually completely pushes him off the rail. And then it's enough that even Sid, because it's kind of crazy to me, because I never would have seen things the way Sid has, but it's kind of, even she's kind of been like, I don't even know if David knows what's right and what's wrong. But then the thing is, like, when you look at it over the course of everything, it's not like it's something that's never come up. It's never like he's necessarily been in a situation to be like, oh, this is right and this is wrong. That's never really came up because everything has always just been focused on him, like, oh yeah, realizing who he really is. But he's never really done anything where it's like, oh man, he's doing this for the good of everyone. It's like, even the whole Farouk situation, that was kind of more of like a fixing his own situation. So it's not like that was for the good of everybody necessarily. So it's kind of interesting. That doesn't seem like that's necessarily come up before. Like, I never really noticed that before, because even though, like, he's never been in like a superhero mode of like, oh, I'm here to save the world and stuff like that necessarily. Like I said, the whole Farouk situation was just him dealing with his own situation. It wasn't really necessarily for anyone else or for the greater good. Argument could be made, yes, it was, but it's just interesting when you actually think about that, because superheroes usually have their superhero moments like, oh, obviously they're on the good. It's like, I don't think David's done anything that's necessarily, not necessarily bad, but not necessarily good either. He's just kind of been existing, and I guess that's kind of the point. I don't know. I'm very curious to see like where all this kind of heads going forward. You even had the situation with Clark bringing in the choke, which apparently that was part of David's plan too. Basically, when it rings, it disrupts their abilities. It seemed like more so like he was talking about him and Farouk, just psychic abilities. But I guess the argument could also be made maybe all mutant abilities. I don't know. It's kind of interesting because like only a handful of mutant abilities have ever really been outright showcased so far in the show, like outright being like, oh yeah, this is a mutant ability. It's kind of interesting because even the show doesn't dive too deeply into it. It doesn't like, oh, add in all these mutants with all these different abilities. It's like, no, the core cast that we have, and then maybe eventually it'll spread out beyond that. But I guess because they are trying to keep it, the story small in the sense of it only has like this circle of characters, like the ones we kind of got to know in season 1, kind of continuing their story in season 2, but still the main focus is David. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting thinking about it in regards. You know, I think maybe that's just also because I'm comparing it to other superheroes where you get superhero stuff here and there, super villains, like, you know, taking something like The Flash, for example, where all these different metahumans are presented to you, or, you know, even if you use something more Marvel related, even like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's like, oh, you'd see Inhumans pop up here and there. Like, it's just kind of interesting that mutants haven't been, I guess, and even more at when we would be like The Gifted, where it's like there's mutants like every 2 seconds, like, oh, here's a mutant, different mutants, different abilities, different people. I feel like that, but that's not the nature of the show. It's just kind of interesting when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. Farouk with his new body, I don't know if he outright killed him. It might just be like he kind of knocked him out, but he does throw away the tuning fork. But at the very end, you kind of have David giving his little monologue, and then he goes boo. So I guess that means, I mean, I would assume at this, well, because the fact of the matter is, it fits the time frame too, because it's like, oh yeah, what did Sid say? She's like, oh yeah, in 2 weeks or a week or so, you end up killing Farouk, and it's been like 2 weeks since David got back. So we do know that he ends up killing Farouk by bashing his head in, which once again comes down to the situation. Sid potentially losing her arm, this whole situation with Farouk, seems like time's playing out exactly the way it's supposed to. Like, it's almost like, is there any changing it? Was there ever going to be any changing it? Why did David keep so much stuff from Sid? Is it because, like I said, there is some truth to it, that him being a monster, that him being some psychopath, which is kind of sad. Like I said, I've never had seen the show turn on its main protagonist so hard like that. I was like, wow. It's kind of like retroactively being like, all the stuff he thought that was kind of cool about David, he's actually a terrible person. It's like, wow, what? It's like, I didn't see that before. It's like, well, we're making you realize, like, yeah, you've kind of been terrible along with him, not realizing how much of a terrible piece of crap he's been. It's like, that's crazy to me. Like, obviously that's me paraphrasing and probably going to the extreme with it, but still, like I said, it's the thing is, you can't take 100% of the truth because it's from Farouk, but at the same time, you can't completely deny it because there are points that he is making. Obviously, he's manipulating and trying to obviously make himself off more to be the hero, but you get what I'm trying to say. So I'm very interested to see what goes down next episode, because I halfway expect it to be Lenny who ends up, because for her, it's like, oh, she's waiting around for the big payback, because I'm sure she's the one that's going to put a bullet in Farouk's head, potentially. So we do also know that Oliver is still alive. So also, who's going to deal with that Minotaur situation? Is that going to be Carrie who ends up killing it, or what's going to go down with that whole thing? Also, Melanie, is she okay? Is she not okay? I am so curious to see how this all plays out in the next episode. It's definitely going to get very, very interesting. Like I said, this was a great episode. Just kind of left me thinking a lot about everything, So, which I think that's one of the strongest aspect of this show. It kind of makes you think, kind of make you look at things from a different perspective, I guess. Like I said, we'll just have to wait to see what goes down in the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.